The demand for hosting a Formula One race is something that is going to be ever growing.
Today we are worldwide calendar approach, more races for sure, but I think that in Europe, even in the future, I'm expecting to see races where the rotational principle could be applied.
With over 30 tracks now expressing their interest in hosting a Formula One race, the landscape of the Formula One calendar is going to go under a huge transformation. We are seeing more street circuits than we have ever seen before, and in my personal opinion, this number is only going to increase going forward. So what is track rotation, and can it solve this problem of an abundance of tracks on a limited Formula One calendar? Saudi Arabia in recent years are eager to make an impact in Formula One. They have the new high-speed Jeddah street circuit, but they aren't content with just that one race. They are now planning on having 2 races on the Formula One calendar, one of those being a brand new permanent track. Saudi Arabia started construction in 2019 of a brand new city called Qiddiya. With Saudi Arabia looking to expand their tourism, this is a purpose-built brand new city with the sole purpose of entertainment, sports and arts. This new permanent F1 track is planned to be built inside of a theme park, surrounded by roller coasters, and even have a swimming pool above the track. No, seriously, look at some of the renders that they have produced. Once you've seen things like this, you will now understand why the likes of Spa are facing an uncertain future on the Formula One calendar.
I can't fucking compete! Everybody's shot is so on right now, and I can't compete, dude. I can't.
Which one of these 2 tracks in Saudi Arabia or Spa will generate more money for Formula One? And unfortunately, Formula One are always going to go for the option that brings them in more money. Now, Spa signed a 1-year contract extension last year, keeping it on the calendar for this season, but no further contract talks have been agreed, so at the moment it is not on the 2024 calendar. Meanwhile, other countries are exploring the option of hosting a Formula One race or even hosting multiple races. Spain, for instance, has discussed the possibility of creating a street circuit in Madrid, and London has been surrounded by a persistent rumour of a street circuit that would partner Silverstone in London. So what's the solution for this? Is it having a rotating calendar? Many people have advocated for this, but this has proven detrimental in the past with the likes of Hockenheim and the Nürburgring in Germany. This pushed them both towards bankruptcy, and we no longer have a German Grand Prix on the calendar at all. So what is track rotation if you don't know? Track rotation in Formula One essentially refers to the changing of the location of the races from one season to another. It keeps the calendar fresh and allows different countries to host their races year on year. So they're basically 2 different ideas of a rotating calendar. One where you would have some permanent tracks and some rotational tracks. So for example, you'd have 10 permanent tracks and the remainder would rotate. Or the other would be every single track on the calendar would rotate across a yearly basis. Now I've put together a very rough example of a rotating calendar, just to give you an idea of what it could be like. So the tracks on red from 1 to 10 are permanent tracks that personally I like seeing every year on the calendar and would be happy to see them stay. Now this assumes a 20 race calendar, not 23, mainly just to keep things simple, and also I think a 20 race calendar would be great in Formula One. So we have Bahrain, Silverstone, Austria, Canada, Hungary, Kota, Spa, Japan, Interlagos and Monza being the permanent tracks on the calendar every single year. Now tracks 11 through to 20 would rotate on a yearly basis. So for example, track number 11, first year we would start in Jeddah, then move on to Australia, Baku, Miami, Imola, Monaco, Barcelona, Zandvoort, Singapore and Qatar. Then what would happen in the following year is we would have the first 10 races the same, but instead of Saudi Arabia, we would have Portimao, Sepang, Shanghai, Istanbul, Las Vegas, Paul Ricard, Bud, Mexico City and Abu Dhabi. So across 2 years we would see 30 tracks instead of 20, and this just allows for a much more diverse calendar whilst keeping on some of the classic races. Now this seems like a really good idea in premise, but There are some fundamental flaws with this idea, and one of the best examples we have of this is what happened in Germany. So why did it inevitably fail? It came down to finances, and neither track were able to sign a contract that benefited either track. If you have a grade 1 circuit and you can host Formula 1 races, what you want to be doing is hosting races as frequently as possible. But these will bring in a fraction of what Formula 1 brings in just that one weekend. This was shown recently in Silverstone during COVID-19, when the lack of the race nearly sent Silverstone into bankruptcy. The way that the tracks make their money in Formula 1 is a little bit different to other companies. Formula 1 don't actually make any money from the tickets that are sold at the races. What they will do is tracks such as Spa or Silverstone will bid to have their place on the Formula 1 calendar. Let's just say, for example, each slot on the calendar cost a circuit £20 million. Now with the upfront costs, the tracks will make their money back through tickets, merchandise, food, and sponsored events during the race. Now when you have a track like Las Vegas, which attracts many celebrities, you can see from the ticket price alone that they are willing to pay over the odds just to go watch this Formula 1 race. Whereas some of the more classic circuits like in Hungary or Zandvoort, for example, these ticket prices are, I would say, fairly reasonably priced, although they have gone up in recent years, and these reasonably priced tickets don't allow the circuits to amount as much revenue and bid a higher price for their slot on the Formula 1 calendar. Now another example of this is why street circuits have become so popular in recent years. Take Miami for example. For the other 51 weeks of the year, Miami is deconstructed and it is used for the Hard Rock Stadium car park. Now the Hard Rock Stadium will bring in different incomes from the sport and events that they host at that stadium for the rest of the year. Now Monaco, Melbourne, Singapore, Las Vegas, these are all the same. When they are not racing on this track, they can disassemble the course and use this for other purposes and generate money. Traditional circuits on the other hand, their sole purpose is racing. Yes, you can have different racing events at these circuits, but racing is very expensive, and some of the series that just don't bring in as much revenue from fans attending or cars paying as much money to run at these events just means that a lot of these venues are a bit of a money pit. Could you imagine if the likes of Old Trafford just hosted one football match per year? There's no way that football club would be able to keep running, and getting fans through the door 52 weeks of the season is their number one priority. So with street circuits, their outgoings are a lot less compared to these permanent tracks that have to maintain staff, security, maintenance all year round. So the money that they are saving can go forward to bid a higher amount for their spot on the Formula 1 calendar. Now although track rotation does seem like a pretty bad idea, there are some positives that I would like to highlight. The first being that it does open up variety in Formula 1. Everyone would like to see more tracks on the Formula 1 calendar, and this does allow for that. The other pro is global representation. Formula 1 prides itself in a global sport, but it is a sport that has 3 races in America, about half the calendar is in Europe, yet there is no track in Africa. Track rotation allows for more variation, and the American tracks and the European tracks could rotate within themselves, and you could swap these for a track like Kyalami in South Africa. Another pro that I considered would be that tracks would potentially try harder to invest in their own infrastructure. If they know their sport may be at risk, then they would potentially try harder to invest in the sport for the fans. Monaco, for example, is pretty comfortable on the calendar. Spa has built some brand new grandstands in recent years to help push this, but do Monaco have to invest in their infrastructure to make Formula 1 better? No, not really. Now the cons are the main thing that I want to highlight with track rotation, and the first would be tradition and lack of interest. People get into traditions of watching the race every year when it comes to their hometown, and if people are unsure on whether Silverstone is on this year or isn't on this year, it may cause a lack of interest. The second con relates to the infrastructure investment, and this is just a lack of revenue. Half the races mean that you have half the revenue, and with permanent tracks, their outgoing cost is still going to be just as high. Yes, they won't have to pay for all the costs on race day, but maintaining the track for all year long is an extremely expensive outgoing cost. Another con is uncertainty. For example, what we had in Imola. Now, if Imola was on a rotating calendar this year and it got cancelled due to the flooding, that would mean we didn't see Imola the year before, and we won't see Imola for next year. So that could mean we have potentially 4 years between races at Imola. Now, I think a circuit like that would struggle if it didn't host a Formula 1 race in 4 years. So I think they need to be regular races at these circuits in order for them to be profitable. Another con is I don't think Formula 1 need to race at every single Grade 1 circuit that is available to race on. Formula 1 is currently on the up and is in a very advantageous position for negotiation. I think Formula 1 should negotiate with the 23 very best tracks to have them on the calendar. Now, yes, this is slightly subjective, but when you're picking the likes of Las Vegas and Miami over other tracks like Shanghai and Kyalami, every single person knows that that is just a money grab. While the occasional rotation or addition of new tracks to Formula 1 can bring freshness and diversity to the Formula 1 calendar, I think a complete annual track rotation would cause disturbance to the stability of Formula 1. Finding a difference between tradition and innovation is one of the best things about Formula 1, and I think they should apply this to the calendar. I think Formula 1 needs to be decisive and act with good intentions when looking at the calendar for the next 10-20 years. Comparing where we were even 10 years ago to now, it's clear to see which direction it is going, and I can only see it going one way at the current stage. Formula 1 is going to lose a huge amount of fans if we lose the likes of Spa and Silverstone to racing in theme parks, down strips in Las Vegas, and around car parks in Miami. Formula 1 needs to do the right thing and keep these classic tracks on the calendar for the fans, as they are the ones that support and allow this whole thing to happen. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. Let me know down in the comments what you think of a rotating calendar. I will see you in the next one. Cheers.